What is up, everybody? Piscean here, bringing you another video. Before we get started, I'd appreciate if you subscribe, like, comment, and share if you dare and care, with peace and love. So this is another installment of astrological forensics, but this is threat assessment and zodiacal criminology. Call it the Behavioral Analysis Unit 7 of the FBI and the Celestial Investigations Division. So, if you're not familiar, the following dossiers represent the most complex investigations undertaken by the Celestial Investigations Division, or CID, of the FBI. This is obviously conceptual. A specialized unit that applies rigorous astrological science to violent crime, financial fraud, counterintelligence, and cold cases. Unlike the sensationalized psychic detective tropes, our methodology is grounded in millennia of Hermetic astronomy, statistically validated forensic techniques, and the immutable principle that the celestial sphere records the imprint of every significant terrestrial event. We do not read minds, we read charts. And when read correctly, a decumbiture, a horary, a progressed lunation, or an electional signature can speak more truth than any coerced confession. In the following cases are presented as educational exemplars for the next generation of astrocriminologists. They contain graphic detail, mature themes, and advanced astrological reasoning. Viewer discretion is both legally and celestially advised. SSA Orion Cross. We'll begin with the organizational lore, the origin of the Celestial Investigations Division. Well, the CID was born from a single haunting paradox. In 1993, a serial arsonist known as the Equinox Torture was apprehended not by DNA or fiber analysis, but because FBI profiler Dr. Hilaria Voss noticed that all 12 fire start times clustered around the precise degrees of the sun's ingress into cardinal signs. She consulted an academic astrologer, constructed a composite chart of the crime moments, and identified a natal signature that matched a suspect already in the borough's periphery. When confronted with his own electional chart for the next planned attack, timed to the approaching autumn equinox, the suspect immediately confessed, believing the stars had betrayed him. The borough, skeptical but pragmatically impressed, quietly established the astrological forensics unit under the behavioral analysis umbrella. Over the subsequent decades, it evolved into the fully fledged Celestial Investigations Division, with a mandate to investigate any federal crime where temporal precision, ritualistic timing, or esoteric knowledge suggests an astrological dimension. Today, the CID is housed in a nondescript building in Quantico, its walls lined with astronomical charts, its servers humming with proprietary software that calculates decumbitures, horaries, and planetary transits for every zip code and every minute of every day. Agents are trained in both conventional forensic science and advanced astrological techniques, including medieval horary, Persian natal rectification, and the forensic application of fixed stars. The unit's conviction rate stands at 94%, largely because astrological evidence, when properly marshaled, is exceptionally difficult to fabricate. Cosmos, unlike a human, cannot be intimidated into perjury. So we'll begin with case file CID 091, the Eclipse Murder, State v. Martin Kessler. So we see our charges: first degree premeditated homicide, conspiracy to commit astrologically timed murder. The date of the incident, October 14th, 2023, annular solar eclipse at 21 degrees Libra, the location being Asheville, North Carolina. And CID personnel, we have our lead investigator, forensic astrologer, and evidence collection. And the status is convicted, life without parole. All right. Now I'm going to go into discovery and initial enigma. So at 1:17 p.m. EDT on October 14th of 2023, the exact midpoint of the annular solar eclipse, a 911 call reported a woman collapsed in her garden, bleeding from the nose and ears. Paramedics arrived within minutes to find Eleanor Vance, 52, deceased with no visible trauma other than the hemorrhage. The medical examiner initially ruled it a massive intracranial aneurysm, noting that the rupture coincided perfectly with the eclipse's peak. The death was deemed natural, a tragic coincidence, while her husband, Martin Kessler, a retired professor of astronomy, was grief-stricken but composed, having been at a public eclipse viewing party 12 miles away with hundreds of witnesses. 2 weeks later, Eleanor's sister, a clinical psychologist, contacted the Asheville police with a suspicion. Martin had a lifelong obsession with astrological assassination, a theory he'd explored in unpublished academic papers. She provided a flash drive containing encrypted files that, when decrypted, revealed a meticulous plan to utilize the gravitational and archetypal resonance of a solar eclipse to trigger a pre-existing cerebral vulnerability at the precise moment of maximal celestial pressure. The document included Eleanor's natal chart with a detailed analysis of her 8th house, the death house, or shared resources, and a transit forecast highlighting the October 14th eclipse as the optimal window for termination without physical evidence. The local PD, out of their depth, flagged the case to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, which routed it to the CID. And now we're on to our astrological forensics, the decumbiture of death. So Dr. Starling cast the decumbiture chart for the moment of Eleanor's collapse, October 14th, 2023, 1:17 p.m. EDT, Asheville, NC, and the chart was, in her words, an astrological smoking gun. So what do we see? Well, the decumbiture ascendant is at 17 degrees Aquarius and is conjunct the fixed star Saddle-Malik, the lucky star of the king. But here it was besieged by a retrograde Saturn in the first house at 0 degrees Pisces, the degree of the death of the physical form. The ascendant ruler, being Uranus, for Aquarius, was in Taurus in the 4th house of endings, the grave, and mainly your ancestral roots, exactly squaring the ascendant and tightly opposite the Sun-Moon eclipse conjunction in the 10th house, the public event. So the eclipse point itself, which is 21 degrees Libra, is at exactly on the 8th house cusp in this chart, a placement that occurs by chance with infinitesimal odds. What's more damning here is Mars, the planet of violence and acute trauma, was at 0 degrees Scorpio in the 9th house of higher knowledge, foreign influences, academia, in an exact inconjunct, which is 150 degrees to Neptune in Pisces. So this aspect in forensic astrology is known as the invisible weapon, a death that appears natural or mysterious, but is induced through esoteric or psychological means. The moon, ruling the body, was in the 6th house of illness at 29 degrees Virgo, the critical degree of physiological crises, and it was applying to a square with Mars. As well, we see the decumbiture painted a picture not of a random aneurysm, but of a precisely timed psychosomatic assault. A death engineered by someone who understood that extreme emotional or psychological shock delivered during a vulnerable transit could trigger a somatic crisis in a predisposed individual. Eleanor's natal chart revealed a long-standing Moon-Saturn square, a predisposition to melancholy and latent vascular fragility, and her solar return for 2023 featured Pluto exactly on the ascendant. So a year of existential threat. Martin Kessler, as an astronomer and secret astrological practitioner, had not wielded a knife, he had wielded a planetary hour. And now we're on to the natal and synestric analysis of the suspect. So investigators obtained Martin Kessler's natal chart. Birth data is verified from his mother. We see he was born March 7th, 1961, at 3:44 a.m. in Durham, NC. And we also see that makes his sun at 16 degrees Pisces, and it's in the 3rd house. And it's also tightly square Saturn and Sag in the 12th house. A brilliant but emotionally repressed intellectual, skilled at concealing grandiosity behind academic rigor. We see Moon at 29 degrees Libra in the 10th house, the degree of the public death of the feminine, exactly conjunct the fixed star Spica, a genius marker but also a signature of dramatic false. The moon on the midheaven gave him a need to perform his intellectual dominance, a need thwarted by his wife's greater public success as a botanical researcher. We see Mercury is at 26 degrees Aquarius and is conjunct Ketu and square Neptune and Scorpio in the 8th. So mind capable of self-deception and occult manipulation. The Mercury-Neptune square often manifests as magical thinking that justifies immoral acts. Pluto at 0 degrees Virgo in the 6th in its retrograde, so it's an obsessive compulsive need for control over bodily processes. Merged with a deep knowledge of medical astrology, Martin had access to his wife's medical records, including her vascular anomaly. When we look at the synastry with Eleanor's chart, we see a Saturn exactly squared her moon, a classic widowmaker aspect in forensic astrology, indicating that he imposed emotional restriction onto her, potentially exacerbating her anxiety and hypertension. His Pluto tightly opposed her Mercury, showing a pattern of psychological manipulation. Her death eclipse at 21 degrees Libra exactly conjoined his natal part of death, which is the ascendant adding the 8th cusp, subtracting the moon, calculated for his own chart, a placement he could not have known about unless he studied medieval Arabic parts. A search of his home office revealed a heavily annotated copy of Bonatti's Liber Astronomiae, with the part of death circled in red. When we look at this electional chart reconstruction here, the murder as ritual timing. So the decrypted planning documents contained what appeared to be an electional chart for the moment of Eleanor's death. The CID software confirmed that Martin had selected a time when transiting Mars would apply to an exact square to his wife's natal moon, while the eclipsed sun-moon midpoint would conjoin her 8th house cusp. The goal was not a physical attack, but a psychic injury, a sudden, terrifying revelation designed to be delivered at the eclipse peak. Further investigation uncovered the delivery mechanism, a pre-scheduled email containing fabricated evidence of her lifelong infertility's cause, a falsified medical report claiming she had a genetic disorder that would have been terminal anyway. The email was set to send at 1:12 p.m., allowing her 5 minutes of shocked reading before the eclipse's peak electromagnetic and astrological pressure triggered the fatal aneurysm. The email was recovered from her phone, opened at 1:14 p.m. Her final expression, captured on a neighbor's security camera, was one of profound, soul-shattering despair. Kessler had killed her with a lie timed to a celestial event, a murder without fingerprints. We look at the trial and astrological expert testimony. So Dr. Shalene Starling testified as the government's expert in astrological forensics, a first for a federal capital case in North Carolina. She presented the decumbiture chart in the electional reconstruction, explaining to the jury that while astrology does not cause events, the correlation between the chosen moment and the victim's transits was so statistically improbable and so demonstrably engineered that it constituted premeditation. The defense argued that astrology was pseudoscience and that the aneurysm was natural. On cross, Starling calmly noted that the defendant's own behavior confirmed the astrological ritual. He had worn a black suit on the day of the eclipse, a color associated with Saturn, the planet of death, and had positioned himself to be photographed under a Saturn talisman at the public viewing party. The photograph was entered as evidence. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Martin Kessler was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The case established a legal precedent that the intent to cause harm through astrologically timed psychological manipulation constitutes first-degree murder, even when the mechanism of death is natural. The decumbiture chart was sealed as a federal exhibit and is now taught at the FBI Academy's astrocriminology module. Alrighty. We're going to move right on to case file CID 127. This is the Venus retrograde poisoning state v. Rosalind Chen. And we see the charges here: 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and serial poisoning with astrological signature. So this is where things are going to get a little bit more graphic. So we have the date of the incidents, multiple, spanning from December 2021 throughout July 2023, all occurring during the Venus retrograde periods. For this, we have our case lead and our interrogation. The individual's been convicted with 4 consecutive life sentences. So, we look at the pattern recognition, or our PR. And so between December 2021 and August of 2023, we see 4 residents of Serenity Pines expired under gentle, peaceful circumstances, each death attributed to congestive heart failure. A 5th resident, Harold Dumont, nearly died but was resuscitated. What caught the attention of a Portland PD homicide detective was a peculiar detail. All 4 deaths occurred within a 40-day window of Venus retrograde, and each victim was found with a single red rose on their nightstand, a gesture initially attributed to the facility's compassionate staff. When Harold survived, he whispered to a nurse, "She said Venus would take me beautifully, but I fought the retrograde." The she was identified as Rosalind Chen, a 64-year-old registered nurse with an unblemished record and a reputation for an almost beatific bedside manner. The detective, intrigued by the astrological detail, requested CID assistance. We have our forensic horary and our decumbiture analysis. So Dr. Sterling cast decumbiture charts for each of the 4 fatal events. All 4 showed a consistent forensic signature. The ascendant ruler, quadrant of the universe, the victim in the 8th house across all charts. Venus retrograde exactly on the 8th house cusp in 3 of the 4 charts, and in the 4th house. In the 4th, always in a critical degree, like 15 degrees or 29 degrees of the sun it occupied. Venus is the planet of peace, love, and gentle transition. Its retrograde periods are associated with revisiting the past, and in medical astrology, it governs the heart and the act of dying without struggle. The moon, significator of the body, applying to a harmonious trine with Venus exactly at the time of death, indicating a soft passing. In each chart, the moon was also in a Venus-ruled sign like Taurus or Libra, or exalted in Pisces, suggesting the deaths were intentionally made comfortable, almost aesthetized. In a single red rose. The botanical attribute of Venus was found at each scene, and its placement matched the Venus house placement in the decumbiture. So the signature was too consistent to be coincidence. The perpetrator was using astrological election to administer poison at a time that would produce a serene, almost beautiful physiological shutdown. The poison itself was identified via toxicology of Harold Dumont's blood, a rare, slow-acting cardiac glycoside derived from Nerium oleander, a plant ruled by notably Venus in planetary herbalism. The poisoner was not just an astrologer, she was a master of astrological phytotherapy. Right. So we look at the natal profiling of the perpetrator. Rosalind Chen's natal chart with the birth time obtained from hospital records, and it painted a chilling portrait. So we see Sun at 11 degrees Scorpio in the 10th house, and it's exactly squaring Pluto and Leo in the 7th house. So this is the angel of death aspect in forensic astrology. A person who wields power, Pluto, over partnerships, 7th, through a scorpionic transformation obsession. Sun square Pluto often manifests in figures who blur the line between healing and killing, seeing themselves as agents of a higher will. Moon is at 28 degrees Cancer, the degree of the Anima Mundi, extreme empathy, conjunct Sirius, the star of spiritual arrogance in the 6th house of service. Moon in Cancer, it gives a profoundly nurturing nature, but on Sirius it becomes messianic. She believed she was helping souls ascend. Mercury at 2 degrees Sag, retrograde, in mutual reception with Jupiter in Gemini. So a philosophical mind capable of rationalizing anything. She had privately developed a creed she called Venusian transition, which held that the merciful death aligned with the Venus retrograde granted the soul safe passage through the underworld. Venus itself at 15 degrees Libra, exactly on the fixed star Vendemiatrix, the gatherer of souls, a star associated with harvests, endings, and the collecting of the deceased. Her Venus was stationary direct, a placement of immense concentrated Venusian focus, which she channeled into her art, quote-unquote. A search of her apartment revealed a meticulously organized astrological medical kit, oleander extract labeled by harvest time, vials of lily of the valley, another Venus cardiac poison, and a leather-bound grimoire listing the natal charts of all Serenity Pines residents, with annotations on their upcoming Venus transits. Each victim had a natal Venus afflicted by transiting Pluto or Saturn, making them ripe for transition in her framework. Interrogation through the chart. The CID interrogation strategy crafted by S.A. Thomas Greer employed a technique known as astro-confrontational interviewing. Rather than directly accuse, Greer displayed Rosalind's own natal chart and began asking her to explain the Venus-Chiron opposition she'd been experiencing in transits. He spoke her astrological language. After 40 minutes of technical, compassionate dialogue about the burden of a healer's Venus, Rosalind began to cry and confess to all 4 murders in the 5th attempt, stating, "I gave them the gift of a perfect astrological death. Venus never meant for them to suffer. She chose me as her acolyte. The confession, recorded with her consent during a Jupiter hour, making it spiritually admissible under federal astro-evidentiary codes, was later used to secure a conviction. Trial. The Venus defense rejected. At trial, the defense attempted an astrological insanity plea, arguing that Rosalind Chen was under a cosmic delusion and could not distinguish right from wrong due to her messianic Venus complex. Dr. Starling, called as a rebuttal expert, testified that while astrology influences temperament, it does not compel action, and that Rosalind's decision to prepare, dose, and administer poison across multiple retrograde periods demonstrated clear premeditation and volition. The jury agreed. She was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without parole. The rose that was found with the 4th victim now sits in a sealed glass case in the FBI's Museum of Criminal Instruments. Its astrological symbolism labeled for visiting agents. On the case file CID 203, the Horary Insider Trading Ring, United States v. Bradley Thorne and Celestial Consultants, Inc. So, we see the charges are securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit insider trading using astrological divination, obstruction of a federal investigation by destruction of ephemerides. Location, New York Stock Exchange, Greenwich, CT, in the Cayman Islands. Investigation periods March 2022 through November 2023. We have our financial astrology unit and our digital forensics on this. And convicted 15 years federal imprisonment for Thorne, 5 years for principal astrologer, and corporation is dissolved. So let's see what happened here with these anomalous trade patterns. Well, the SEC flagged a series of suspiciously timed options trades in mid-cap biotech stocks across 2022. The trades, placed by a small hedge fund, Thorne Capital, consistently beat earnings announcements by 24 to 48 hours, netting millions. Traditional forensic accounting found no evidence of hacked emails, insider contacts, or data breaches. The timing of the trades, however, displayed a bizarre regularity. Every major position was open during a period when the moon was void of course, or VOC, a time when traditional astrologers advised against initiating important matters. This counterintuitive pattern suggested that the trader was not avoiding VOC moons, but actively selecting them for a specific astrological purpose. The CID's financial astrology unit was called in. Dr. Starling recognized the VOC moon pattern as a signature of horary astrology, a technique where a practitioner casts a chart for the moment a question is asked. In horary, a VOC moon does not necessarily mean do nothing. It can indicate that the matter is already decided or that the question is moot. A skilled horary astrologer, however, can interpret a VOC moon as an indicator that the market's movement is already locked, allowing a trade to proceed with confidence. The hypothesis, Bradley Thorne, the fund's manager, was consulting a horary astrologer to time his trades, asking questions like, will X stock rise after earnings, and acting on the answer. So we have our horary forensics here, reverse engineering the celestial questions. The CID obtained the exact timestamps of Thorne's trades from the NYSE data. For each trade, Dr. Starling cast a horary chart for the precise minute that the order was placed, and so using Thorne's location. The charts revealed a forensic masterpiece of astrological cunning. Of course, we look at the ascendant. In every trade chart, it was either in a cardinal sign, indicating initiative, or in a sign ruled by Mercury, Virgo, or Gemini, the planet of commerce. The ascendant's ruler was almost always angular, being the 1st, 4th, 7th, or 10th house, indicating that the current Thorne was in a position of strength. The 5th house, speculation cusp, was consistently aspected by Jupiter, the planet of profit, or the Sun, the planet of success. In the 3 largest profitable trades, Jupiter was exactly trine the 5th house cusp. The moon's VOC status was not accidental. In each chart, the moon made its last aspect to a benefic, Venus or Jupiter, before turning VOC, a classical horary indicator of a positive outcome that is already sealed. The 8th house, other people's money, was always strongly tenanted by either Mercury information or Pluto hidden knowledge, suggesting that the trades were based on the non-public insights. Crucially, There was a repeated signature being Mercury in the 8th, squaring Neptune in the 11th, indicating that the information was obtained through a deceptive or esoteric intermediary. Therefore, the conclusion was clear. These trades were not based on public analysis. They were based on horary divinations that functioned as a form of privileged temporal insight, which under federal securities law constitutes an unfair informational advantage akin to insider trading. The astrologer was essentially an information conduit. Right, identifying the astrologer, synastry, and digital footprints. Financial records reveal that Thorn Capital made large consulting fees to a shell company, Celestial Consultants Inc., registered in the Caymans. A CID digital forensics team linked the entity to Dr. Viviana Sable, a former Harvard astrophysicist turned full-time financial astrologer with a private clientele of hedge fund managers. Her website, now seized, offered proprietary celestial market timing using medieval Arabic horary and Saturn-Jupiter synodic cycle analysis. A natal chart analysis of Dr. Sable, birth data obtained via a sealed warrant to her alma mater. It showed the following. Sun in Taurus in the second house conjunct the fixed star Kaput Algol, the infamous demon star associated with headstrong pursuit of wealth and potential for downfall through greed. Mercury and Gemini in the 8th house exactly square Neptune, the signature of manipulative financial communication, and the exact same Mercury-Neptune square found in the trade charts. Jupiter and Sag in the second house trine the Sun. She had amassed a fortune, rationalizing her work as applied celestial mathematics, not occult crime. When confronted with a horary reverse engineering analysis, Dr. Sable invoked her Fifth Amendment right but requested a lawyer who specialized in astrological law, a burgeoning field. Her computer, however, contained a cache of unanswered horary questions for upcoming trades. Complete with annotated charts and recommended dates, the next planned trade was scheduled for an upcoming Mercury retrograde, exploiting volatility. The FBI preempted it, freezing the assets. Legal and celestial precedent. Trial of U.S. v. Thorn and Sable established that using horary astrology to obtain material, non-public temporal insights akin to insider information violated Section 10b of the Securities Exchange Act and SEC Rule 10b-5. Dr. Starling's testimony demonstrated that the charts function as a temporal cipher for market probabilities, and that the trader and astrologer had conspired to exploit this non-public advantage. The defense argued that astrology is not provable as a predictive science, but the prosecution successfully countered that the reliance on the charts, not their objective accuracy, constituted fraud, the same logic that punishes a con artist whose crystal ball happens to work sometimes. Both Thorn and Sable were convicted. Sable received a reduced sentence in exchange for teaching a class on financial astrological forensics at the FBI Academy, a course now mandatory for all CID financial agents. The case files, including the horary charts, have been sealed, but redacted versions are used as training material in the Bureau of Celestial Investigations curriculum. All right. Gotta readjust. Back is fucking. I'm like laying on my bed, like all my elbows. Very uncomfortable. So, let me see. We have one more left, actually. Thought I had a little bit more. All right, so case file CID 281 is the Progress Lunar Murder. Cold case reopened after 22 years. We see the charges: first-degree murder, cold case. Date of the original crime, June 8th, 2001, full moon in Sagittarius. Location, Boulder, Colorado. Our CID personnel, of course, our cold case unit, and forensic astrologer intern. Status is suspect arrested November 2023 with a trial pending as of this report. So the unsolved homicide. In June 2001, 29-year-old college librarian Irene Marchetti was found bludgeoned in her apartment. There were no signs of forced entry, no DNA, no witness. The case went cold. 22 years later, a newly hired Boulder PD detective attending a CID workshop learned about progressed chart activation, and wondered if the victim's chart could offer new leads. The case file was brought to the CID Cold Case Annex. So first, we're going to go through in more detail our astrological autopsy, so progressed and directed arcs. So Dr. Starling cast Irene's natal chart for October 19th, 1971, 7:28 p.m. Boulder, Colorado, and examined the secondary progressions and solar arc directions for the date of death. What emerged was a textbook example of a fated death signature, but with a twist. So the individual's natal Venus was at 28 degrees Scorpio in the 8th house, exactly conjunct the fixed star Unukalhai, the serpent's heart, associated with toxic relationships and sudden violent ends for women. Venus and Scorpio in the 8th pointed to a possessive, sexually charged connection. Secondary progressed moon had reached 29 degrees Taurus, which is the degree of the fatal entanglement, was applying to an exact opposition with progressed Pluto in Scorpio. So progressed moon-Pluto oppositions often time violent emotional crises. When they fall across the second 8th house axis, they frequently correlate with homicide by an intimate romantic partner, sexual, friends with benefits, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. So solar arc directed Mars violence had just crossed the IC, Imum Coli, which is the 4th house cusp of home and endings. This direction indicated an act of violence in the domestic sphere. So dying in the house, and it occurred at the exact arc of 30 degrees 13, indicating a male perpetrator aged approximately 30 at the time of the crime. The solar arc of Mars to IC equals 1 degree per year of life, and that perpetrator was likely 30 or 31 years old in 2001. Most critically, transiting Saturn on the day of the murder was at 6 degrees Gemini, forming an exact square to Irene's natal moon at 6 degrees Pisces. The moon rules the 7th house in this chart. Saturn transit squared the 7th house ruler is a classic astrological signature of death at the hands of a partner. The aspect was exact to the arc minute at the estimated time of death, confirming the connection. So we look at our synestric analysis and the suspect's chart. So Irene had a long-term boyfriend at the time of her death, a man named Daniel Orrick, who had been the initial suspect but was released due to lack of evidence. CID requested his birth date, February 3rd, 1971, making him 30 at the time. His natal chart revealed a Venus-Mars conjunction in Aries in the 8th, opposite Pluto, a profile of explosive, possessive passion. His natal moon at 19 degrees Leo was exactly square Irene's Venus in Scorpio, a synestric aspect known in forensic astrology as the obsessive lover's bondage. When Dr. Starling calculated the composite chart of the couple, the composite moon was at 27 degrees Taurus, exactly the degree of Irene's progressed moon at death. The composite moon was opposed by composite Pluto from Scorpio, and transiting Saturn was squaring the entire composite moon-Pluto axis on the day of the murder. This configuration is almost diagnostic of a fatal domestic violence event. Further, the composite ascendant was at 8 degrees Capricorn, and transiting Mars on the murder date was 8 degrees Capricorn, exactly on that ascendant. Mars on the composite ascendant is a point of no return in relationship dynamics, the moment when latent violence erupts. Interrogation and confession through astrology. Daniel Orrick, now 52, living under a new name in Idaho, was brought in for questioning. The CID employed an astro-confrontation technique, presenting the composite chart of his relationship with Irene. Agents pointed out the transiting Mars on the composite ascendant and explained that the stars had recorded his rage. Orrick, who had secretly studied astrology in prison, he served time for an unrelated assault, paled. He asked for a glass of water, then said, "I didn't know anyone could read it like that." Under a dignified Mercury, during a Virgo moon, he confessed. The bludgeoning had occurred during an argument after she threatened to leave him. The rage exploded precisely as transiting Mars culminated on the composite ascendant. His confession matched the astrological timing perfectly, and the cold case closed. As of this writing, Orrick awaits trial. Deposited and progressed chart evidence has been ruled admissible by the Colorado District Court under the Federal Celestial Evidence Act of 2021, which permits forensic astrological testimony when validated by empirical celestial mechanics and peer-reviewed methodologies. Dr. Starling will testify, and the prosecution will present the synastry charts as demonstrative aids. A conviction is expected. All right, and technically, this is volume 3. This is going to be more of a we're going to go over more criminal intent, victimology, and evidentiary reconstruction. And there will be more volumes. These are going to have, unifying astrological principles, crime typology, forensic methodology, progressions in the Bureau's understanding of how celestial mechanics intersect with the following: criminal intent, victimology, and evidentiary reconstruction. Designed to train the next generation of astroforensic agents while pushing the boundaries of what is admissible in federal court. The solar return of the serial offender, cyclical returns, recidivism, yes, and the astrological signature of repetition. I will see you in the next video teaching you this. With peace and love, Piscean out.